This tutorial is about combining text and images. And I have prepared a fairly long list of different things that you can do that I will go over quickly. I'm not going to show you how to do them. My main aim here is actually to give you ideas that you can implement yourself. Obviously, it's not limited to just what I'm going to show you. The sky is the limit. It all depends on your own creativity and imagination. But I'm just going to be giving you some pointers and also talk a little bit about alignment and a little bit about groupings and things like that. But before we go to the things that I'm going to suggest to you, or give you as ideas, I actually want to first go to this page here, and I want to talk about the very common mistakes that people make when they are not very familiar with creating layouts, when they are first starting out with graphic design. And the most common mistake is actually this one right here, where you place things too far apart. Now, if this image belongs to this text, then it should not be this far apart. There should be a kind of relationship to it. Placing it in the middle at the top may be an okay idea, who knows? Depending on how much text you have. If you have this much text, then it's probably not a very good idea. But then the way that I had this in the beginning, it also wasn't aligned. So it wasn't aligned to the center of the page. It wasn't aligned to this guide here, which is actually the one of the start of the horizontal menu here. It wasn't aligned to here, which is the start of the end of the typography of the logotype. It wasn't aligned to here, which means it also wasn't aligned to the text, because the text is actually aligned to this guide. So it was just sort of sitting in the middle somewhere, quite lost, not really belonging to anything. And this is pretty much the biggest mistake that people make. And the idea here is that things that belong together should stay close together. That's one of the core principles of layout design. We call that clustering or grouping. So that's the first one. Now here I have repetitions of that. I'm showing you a different way in which this mistake could be made. Again, this space here between these images here and this text here is way too much. It should be much closer together. And then on top of that, I have also quite deliberately left this unaligned, so we also have a piece of text that is not aligned, and this text is not aligned to any of the guides, and the images are just kind of placed butting right up against the edge of the page, which is okay, you can do that. But here this one is like that, but then this one isn't like that. It's not up against the page. Are they centered with each other? No, but even if they were, that would not really make a difference, because the really important thing is that these images belong to this text here. And, well, this text is dummy text, people. I'm talking about completely different things here. It's the dummy text that or rather, it's real text that I made for my other Project Studio class for a website that I had put together for them as a tutorial site. So I just used that. So it's not about food. All the images that I'm going to be showing you will be about food, but let us just assume that these two images are supposed to belong together with this text. So then why is there such a big distance between them? And why are they not aligning to anything? So let's see. Would it be better if this aligned to the top of this paragraph here? Possibly, yes. And then would it be better if this one aligned to this paragraph here? Well, no, not really, because they are still really far apart. Well, the alignment is helping just a little bit, but not that much. We need to get rid of this distance here. This distance is way too much. We need to have a nice kind of like reasonable gutter between these elements, but it should not be like this. And then finally I want to show you this, which is also a very common mistake that people make, which is using images that have a huge background in which the actual topic of the image, in this case it's a hamburger, is really small. Now, when you hang a picture on a wall, that's a different thing, and there you might want to have a picture which has a very soft and big background and then little things on it. That's different. But when we are talking about layouts and communicating information and graphic design, then we really don't want to have this much space around images, unless they are, of course, meant to be that way, unless they are meant to be backgrounds. So now what I would do with this one here, what should be done with this one here, is that this should be cropped in far more closely, like this maybe. But here this is also not a good crop, because obviously it's kind of like just standing in the middle there, like as if it doesn't know what to do. So maybe if I move it a little bit to the right, it might end up being better. And then if I align it to the top here, let's see, and then maybe make it bigger, and then also get rid of this big space between it and the text, so this much space is about right, then things would improve, things would get better. This is not a very good image, and I chose it deliberately to talk to you about this mistake that people make. So choose your images wisely. Choose images that are nice and full and crisp and clear, where you can zoom in and get nice crops out of them and things like that. Don't go for these wishy-washy images with wishy-washy backgrounds. Just, get nice, crisp, clear images for your layout. Now that we have looked at all the things that one shouldn't do, we can now go to the one where actually we can look at the things that one can do. Now, before we start looking at everything that's on this page here, I actually want to briefly go back to the one that we were looking at just now, this one here, to remark on something else. Now, the main reason why these things are looking this lost is because of all the space, not only the space between the image and the text, which is huge, but also, of course, how the paragraphs are breaking up, because each of them are separate, but they have a lot of space in between them. So those are reasons, yes, but then there's another one which is also quite important, which is that on this sorry about that, on this page here we don't have any headlines and we don't have any subheads. And the thing about headlines and subheads is that they are actually very powerful visual anchors. They tell our eye where we should start, and then they direct our eye from the headline to the subhead and then down to the text. So having a headline and a subhead, or at least a headline, is going to be one of the smartest things that you can do for your layout, because that will really anchor people's eyes. It will give a focus, it will give a starting point. So that's something that I wanted to also remark upon before we continue here. But now that that is done, let's now continue to look at all of these different things that I made. And now the second thing that is very important for a page like this to work is alignment. And as you can see, I have a very wide page here, so you may not be able to see this clearly, and apologies about that if that is the case. I have a ruler right here, right at the edge of the logotype. Then I have another one right at the other edge of the logotype. Then I have one where the menu starts, and then I have one where the menu ends. And I'm just going to go into preview now and just scroll down, and I have fixed the header so that you can actually get a sense of how this alignment is operating. So as we are scrolling down, so for example here, you will see right away that this is aligning to here. And then as we continue to scroll down, again, it's aligning to here. But then when we come here, then this text here is actually aligning to here, and the image is aligning to the left. So then when we continue, now we have the image aligning to here and the text is outside, which is actually a mistake, which I should be correcting, and I will. My oversight, again, here it is aligning exactly to here. And then if we continue, now the text is aligning to here, like so. And we always take the text as the measure. We don't take the images, but we take the text as the measure of alignment. The text is much more important than the images. So let me actually go back to the editor and just remember where I made that mistake. I think it was right here. Yep, so I'm just going to correct that right now, right in front of you. So this here needs to, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to crop this. So I'm just going to come in a little bit instead of scaling it, and then I'm just going to open these up so that now we actually have the correct alignment, which, like I said, is always at the text. Unless there's no text on the page, then maybe you may want to look at images, but under normal circumstances it's the text. And then let's move these up here, and in a way I'm glad that I spotted this and I could correct it right in front of you so that you actually get to see where I made the mistake and how I am now correcting it. So this needs to get aligned to the bottom of the text here, which I just did, and then these need to get moved up so that the space here is just a little bit more than a sentence break, and when we click out it's about equal all the way around. And so now that that's out of the way, let's continue. Now, and incidentally, I'm going to unfreeze the header, because when I preview again I want you actually to see stuff and not be hindered by the header. I just did that so that you could see the alignment, the vertical alignment, which you always get from elements in your header, and then which then, of course, obviously, since the header is visible on all the pages, that replicates itself on all the pages. Now on the first one that I did here, and incidentally this is just dummy text, I mean it's real text but it's dummy text, so it has nothing to do with the images, except maybe the first paragraph here. All the images have to do with food. I just picked them because food is a nice subject. Everybody likes food, and that's the only reason why. It could also be something else. So don't try to associate the content of this text with that. Just look at it as a visual object. And now let's look at what I did. Now what I did with this first one is I actually created a paragraph indent, which means that I moved the paragraphs inside so that they actually aligned with here, and then of course I got this huge big empty box, and inside that I placed this image right here, and then that way we actually get a very nice cluster where everything is working together, where we have well, we only have a gutter's worth of you know, in magazines and in editorial layout the area between the columns is called a gutter, and that's usually quite narrow. It's usually just 3 millimeters or so, 3-4 millimeters, and we are effectively replicating what would happen in an editorial layout here with this narrow gutter, and then the image is right here. Now when we click on the image, we can change the image from here. You probably already know all this, but I'm just going to show it to you anyway. But then there are also a few other things that you may want to look at. Now when you click on this little wheel here, you get the image behaviors. So what happens with the image when it is clicked? It could be magnified, it could be open in a pop-up, a link could open, or nothing could happen. In this case I selected it can be magnified, but usually with these little images that you have inside typographic elements, then usually what you would do is actually nothing happens. But depending on how big your image is, you could also use it can be magnified. Then if you click here, then you could actually go to the embedded Wix photo editor, and then you could make some adjustments if you want to play with brightness, contrast, etc., etc. However, my advice is to actually get images that are already of pretty good quality, that don't need that kind of added tender love and care. And if you need to adjust things, then I would rather do that in Photopea than here in the Wix Editor, although the Wix Editor does give us that option as well, and that's a good thing to know. And then also the Wix Editor is very, very good for cropping images, and that's something that we do a lot. Now, then the next thing is the cropping. So this image is actually quite a bit bigger, and I can make it even bigger because this is actually a very big sized image, so there's no problem making it bigger. And then I can also shape crop it, but we will get to that later. So let me just say apply, and now let's continue to the next one down, which is basically just a variation of the first one, of the one that we saw above. I still have the same image, but now I added two others as well, and I left the first paragraph, added the text, added this image, then the second paragraph I actually set as a long one, and then I have a short one, and then I have a long one, and in the gaps in between then I placed the images. Now there's something here that I should mention. Now this image here has a very white, light-colored background. So in order for it to be visible, in order for us to know exactly where the borders are, what I did with this here is I actually clicked on Design and went to Customize Design, and I set a border which is only 1 pixel wide and it's black. And then when you go to the hover, I actually need to hold on, sorry people, I just made a little mistake here. So here I only need to do that. There's no hover on this one. I thought for a minute that we also had a hover. So I'm just going to make this 1 again, and then hold on. And then I also need to fix the radiuses. Be careful with that. We don't really want these radiuses. We want nice, clean, crisp lines, and we don't want a shadow either. And then we just want it like this. But now that I've made this one like that, what I really need to do in order to be consistent is I also need to add borders around the others, although they actually don't need those borders. They are actually full images with no white areas, so there's no visibility problem at all. However, because I did this one, I also did these so that we actually have a consistency, design system between these 3 images. But usually, as a rule of thumb, I kind of like to leave my images just the way they are, without borders, without shadows, without anything. But here, because of the way that this image is, I made that little exception. Now let's continue to this. This is a very simple thing. Again, the text is now aligned to here, which is the right hand side of the logo type, and then I just put a long narrow image, and I aligned the top of that to the top of the subhead, and then the bottom of that to the bottom of the final paragraph, and that's really all that I did. And when we preview it, I'm not sure if I put a effect on it. No, nothing happens when I scroll over this, so it's a perfectly simple little thing. But it's effective. It's an effective way of placing an image in a nice big way, although it's a vertical format. But this is something that I would advise you to take a look at. Now, here I have pretty much the same thing that I actually have here, except in a different way. Again, the first 2 paragraphs are indented and the image is put inside, and here I did put a effect on it. So when I go to Customize Design, let's see, here's the border. I didn't put any border on this. Doesn't really need one. The radius, I'm just going to change that now in front of you. But then by default, this image, this effect, this frame design has a little concave shadow. You can't really play around with the values of that, but it actually is one of the very few frame effects that Wix has that does look very, very nice. I really like this. I like the softness of this shadow, but most other effects, Wix effects, frame effects that is, I would actually be very careful with. Sorry people, let me just, I just noticed that there's a little unalignment here, so I'm correcting those as I'm going along, because I think that you are benefiting from that, from me spotting my own mistakes and then correcting them. Now, one thing you may have noticed is that I added this 1 pixel line at the bottom of each little section that I made, of each little design that I made. Those are separators, and separators are very effective things to use, except you need to have something to separate, unless you have content that needs to be separated. So in this case, for example, here I'm showing you one style of using a photograph, and here I'm showing you another style of using a photograph. So to have a separator, a stroke between them, actually makes sense. But that's how you should always think of strokes. They are very, very effective, but don't use them out of context. Don't use them when you are not actually separating anything from anything. Then they kind of start becoming silly. But when you have something that needs to be separated from something else, then definitely bear that in mind. Strokes are a very, very effective way of doing that. Now, just to come back to this and to come back to the frame styles. Now, if you come here, and then you can just scroll over this stuff, and it's showing you a lot of different things. Most of them are really, really silly. So like borders inside borders. They have one which has kind of like a grungy border, which I have no idea what that's all about. They have one which has these frame things on top. I guess you would need a darker background to see that. Then they have one which has these corner kind of band-aid things. Again, it's very, very difficult to see them right now. You would need to have a darker background. Then, believe it or not, they have one that has screws. But then there's one final one which I actually quite like, and that's this one right here. Now I'm going to make this black to show you, because it works very, very nicely with black, and I'm going to also make this thicker. And this is just about the only one outside of the one with the shadow that I really like, and that I would also advise you to use as well. Now on to using round images, circles. Now I have said this in class, and I'm going to say it again. For me, the round circular shape only really works as a perfect circle, because the perfect circle is a basic geometric primitive. So it's the circle, the triangle, and the square, as you know. Now when we come to ellipses, then we kind of get all of these sub-meanings. They are a little bit old-fashioned, they're a little bit vintage. They remind us of sort of nostalgic things, and weddings, and you know, Valentine's Day, things like that. And unless that's what you're after, then I would be very careful with that. To have an ellipse on your layout is really going to make things look a little bit old-fashioned. Now, the only way that you can achieve a perfect circle is actually, unless you have a square image. If you have a square image, you can achieve a perfect circle. But unless you have a square image, here in this case I am using this one right here. So unless you have that, you're not really going to be able to do it. So I'm just actually going to just put another image here, just to show you what I mean. So let me actually in fact put the same exact image. Where is it? It's this one right here. So let me just put this over here to show you. Now if I go to here and go to customize design, and then we have that circle thing here, what it's going to give me is an ellipse, because it will just configure itself to the proportions of the image. So you will only be able to get a perfect circle actually with the crop tool, like I said, unless you have a square image to begin with. Okay, so now what happens if you want to have a border around your circular image? You're not going to be able to get that with the customize design tool, because it's actually going to put a frame around your frame, and you absolutely don't want that to happen. So let me just do Ctrl Z. What you would do is you would just make a container box, which is the thing that you get from here, which is a very special kind of box. It's not a decorative element, it's actually a container into which you can put other things, and then they become linked to that box and move together with it. So the other kinds of boxes we have here, these are not containers, these are just decorative images. But you get yourself a container box, you make a circle. Well, they have circular ones, so it would be this one here. You just change the color, obviously, and then you just take your image and then just drag it inside that box. So I'm just going to do it again. So it just said attach to box, and now I'm just going to center it, get the purple lines, and then hey presto, it's inside the box, and that's how I have my border. And now let's come to how we align circular objects. We align circular objects always, always, always from the middle. We never do it from the top or the bottom, or we never do it from the sides. We get ourselves an element and then align our circular object to the middle of that element. And in this particular case, I took these 3 paragraphs and then aligned this to here. Now, if I had taken this and align it, let's say, to the top of the headline, it would not look aligned, because there's all of this huge white space here. The only point where it actually touches the top of that alignment point is just this tip here. So that's not going to be good enough. And then also it comes down like this, yes. So we have this vertical axis, but then nothing else is happening here. So if I align it to this, then I have this nice fleshy part here, which is quite a lot, which is aligned itself to the middle here. So round things always get aligned from the middle, and be careful with that, okay? Now, obviously this thing here is not aligned to here. So the center of this is not aligned to the center of this guide to which I'm aligning everything. But for me that is not that important, because I'm not so concerned about aligning images to these guides. I am more concerned about aligning text to these guides. Now if I had aligned this image to that guide, I would have needed to move this over, and then I would have lost this alignment point, which this ruler here, which for me is much more important than the text. The text is always number one in a graphic design project, no matter what it is, website, layout, brochure, poster, whatever. Text is always number one, and text is what you align first and foremost. So now I'm just going to make a variation of this here using the crop tool, and then using one of the shapes that they have. Now if I go here and if I go here, unfortunately I don't see this plus sign that I need to see, because I have already used that option. So what I need to do in order to show you how this works is actually place a new image and then show it to you in that way. So let's just take this here, it doesn't really matter what it is, and now I'm going to go to the crop tool and go here, and now I get the plus, and then I come to here. It says vector art here. That's not what we want. These are much too complicated to use for an outline. But then if you go here, you go to basic shapes, and then you actually get all the shapes. And some of the shapes are quite silly, so like Mickey Mouse and Pac-Man, and then they have hashtags and ampersands and things like that. Or they have like really finicky ones, which again would probably not be terribly meaningful. They have kind of like ornate ones, which I would advise against. They would make your website look kind of old-fashioned, or also a little bit oriental, Middle Eastern, or alla turca, whatever you want to call it. So I would kind of stick to pretty elemental shapes, but of those they actually have a very nice selection. And also they have these things called amorphic shapes, which I like a lot. And in fact, as a matter of fact, the one that I used for that vegetable thing is this one right here, and there's some more over here. So definitely take a look at those. These trapezoids are very nice. So actually, as a matter of fact, let me just pick, but you can just scroll down. They have arrows, they have these chat speech bubbles could end up becoming quite useful. Some of these arrow shapes are actually nice shapes that you could embed images into. But I'm just going to stick with this trapezoid because I quite like those kinds of shapes. So I'm just going to say apply, and now as you can see we have a trapezoid shape. So that's how that works, and that is how I made this one as well. And again, this is a round form, it's an amorphous thing, so I aligned it from the middle. And here of course it's more difficult to find the middle than the circle, so I eyeballed it. I made a rough calculation. Again, I have two indented paragraphs out of which I create this extra space. These are aligned to here, and that's how it goes. So now let's come to images that are actually more narrow. So it's a very nice idea to place narrow images between the paragraphs of your text. Now, however, these are all separate little pieces, which is how I'm always telling you to bring in your images, your text rather, sorry. Don't think for a minute that you can actually fudge this. And so let's say, for example, you want to you have this text here and you want to put an image in the middle, and then you say to yourself, oh, I'll just, do enter, 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 and then I'll just take the image and, sorry, hold on, and then who's to know, that'll work just fine. Well, actually it won't, because it will look okay on your browser, but it will slip. It will slip on other people's browsers, and it will especially slip on the phone. Because what you are doing, when you do it this way, is you are embedding one HTML object inside another HTML object, but without actually creating the cell for it, so this would slip. So that's not how we do it. That's absolutely not how we do it, and be careful with that. You need to have separate text elements into which you then add your image. Now, I have done a variation of this with 3 of them, and so it's kind of basic, a little bit like this idea here, where I have multiple images that work together with one text, but this is a more simple one, a more elegant one. So I have aligned everything to the edge of the, this time I've aligned it to the edge of the logo, as you can see. Let's go back down, and I have one image which is a long and narrow one right in the middle, and then I have 2 little ones, which one of them, this one here, is aligning to the top and the bottom of this text here. So it's always about alignment, people. That's always what good graphic design is about. We align things to each other. And why do we do that? Because that's the way that the human eye works. It likes to follow direction. It likes to follow clear-cut directions or anchors. So that's why alignment is such an important issue, and I'm actually noticing that this is not completely aligned. So I'm just going to sneak in and just move this up just a tick. So as you can see, it's that detailed what we do. And then this one here is actually aligned to the top of this text, this sentence, the first top sentence, but then the bottom I've left just, in a natural way. I didn't try to align that to anything. And that is okay. The important part is actually the top. We want to align the top. The bottom, if we can also align the bottom, then hey, great. But if not, we don't worry about the bottom, we worry about the top. Okay? Okay, so now this is exactly the same thing with different images, but when we go to the preview, we will actually see that it is not exactly the same thing. What we have here in the middle is a video. And videos are a really, really nice way of placing images, but and you can do that in a lot of different ways on your site. However, don't overdo it. So if you have a video here, then these should be static images. If you have a video running around here, and then a video running here, and then a video running here, then that's going to be an overkill, and that will only help make people get confused. The other thing is, don't try to loop the video. It should just play once and then stop, because people will be busy reading. So let's look at the settings here. So, and also there's this big play button, which for some reason I can't seem to delete that, but anyway, I'll just leave it. Now, you can change the video from here. Obviously, you go to your site files, etc., etc. Now let's look at this here. There's nothing much here to look at, but then if we go here, these are the video box behaviors. So how does it start to play? Automatically. How is it paused? There's no pause. How does it end? It stops. Now I could have said it loops. I didn't, because like I said, I wanted to play just once and then stop, so that people are not distracted while they're reading. It could replay on a click, but then this is nothing terribly important that anybody would want to look at. Now you could set it in slow motion. Video wasn't captured, so I can't do it with that one, but with some of them I can play it in slow motion. But this is a very, very softly moving video anyway, so I wouldn't want to do that. So how is it paused? There's no pause. And then also when you actually place a video box, so let me just show you how I do this. I go to the media files. I go to you can't do it from the images. From the images you can only get images, but if you go to the upload the media thing here, this little mountain picture here, and then go to videos, and let's say I want to add this video. So it just arrived, and then what I can do is I can just resize this any way I want, and it will always place itself in the middle. There's a certain point where it won't resize itself anymore, but I can also come in if I want to. I think it's this silly button here that's stopping it from resizing itself, but with this particular one I can't seem to resize it exactly in the way that I want. However, with most of them I can. So actually let me get rid of this and find another one. Again, go to the media file. So let's try this one here. So see, this one I can resize quite a bit actually. So you just scale it. You can't crop it, there's no crop option. You can mask it with certain things. I don't know. I mean, this kind of looks to me a little bit like an overkill, because at the end of the day this is a video, and then why would you also want to put a shape on it and stuff like that? But I suppose presumably you can do that if you want to. You can also animate it so it can bounce in or whatever, which, you know, be careful with those animations, don't overkill. So anyway, that's how you add the videos. And so here we have a video, and like I said, they are a very, very nice way of adding visual material to your text. Now let's continue, because we have now arrived at a strip video. So this one here was with a video box, but this one here I made with a strip. And then, since this is pretty wide, I actually didn't place anything in here. However, I did do something different here. I created a spot. Now a spot is a certain section of your text that you take out and give a special feature. So here what I did is this thing here, Typography, and this paragraph here, I just took that and put that here, changed the weight of the text. So this is actually regular, but this is medium. I made it slightly the font, I decreased the font size. I aligned the top to the top. I don't worry about whether the lines are aligning. I would drive myself nuts with that and it would never work. What is important is that the top is aligned to the top, and then I also made it right. So this is flush left, I made this flush right, so that I actually get a nice clean column here. Now if I had made this flush left as well, so let's just do it just to show you, then I would have had something strange going on here with this space here. So I just actually made it flush right, so I did add that. But then the main feature here is the big strip. Well, but so how did I do that strip? So let me show you that. So I'm going to add a dark one, and then I'm going to add a light one, just to show you how this works. This one I'm just going to stretch to the page, and I'm also going to make it narrower, and then I just take this here and attach it to the other strip. So you are effectively putting one strip inside the other, and then inside this one here you put your video. So you just go video, and then of course what you can do, let me just undo all of this because I don't want any of this stuff. So what you can do is you can also add a scroll effect, and my favorite is always parallax, but there are other nice ones too, so you should check them out. So when I preview this, actually as I scroll over it, I start getting different parts of the video, because it's a parallax scroll, so it looks like as if the video is standing still, or the area of the video is static, but then the page is sliding over it. That's the effect of the parallax scroll. And now let's continue. Now after that I actually went to make insets, text insets into images. So we will now start taking a look at those. Now basically what these are is that you actually kind of eat into the image. You have an image, but then you, oops, sorry, this just slipped. You have a box. In my case it's the identical color as the background, which is not completely white. It's the hex code FAFAFA, So I put that on on top of the image, exactly at the midpoint of the image, and then inside of that I added a little caption, something that is supposed to go with the image, which in this case it doesn't, I know, but just bear with me, just pretend that it does. But then once I made these, then I had this idea that I would like to show you how to make repeaters yourself. Now, Wix has repeaters, but those work differently. On those repeaters, whatever changes you make on one will immediately take effect on all of the others. So for example, on a Wix repeater, if you move this image from here to here, it will move on all of them. But what I did is I actually made one repeater, and then I just kept using it again and again with different images and with different configurations. And this is actually a very nice, neat way of, hold on, let me just move this up one. There was a little misalignment there. What these are good for is if you have content on your site which is closely related. So for example, let's say you are you have a page with a lot of different wines. One of you is making a website on wines, or one of you is making a website on different kinds of espresso, and then there are other things like that as well, or precious stones. Then you could actually have a page where you have these elements that are repeating each other. So you have one and then the next and then the next. And then I also made one where I slightly changed the strip configuration, and I will get to that in just a minute. So all I did is I placed an image here. These are indented. Then I have that inset box here, and then I made a dark background here, and I added a tiny little color strip at the top, and each one has a slightly different color. But then on each of them the image is actually different. Now they all this one goes all the way to the edge, but this one doesn't, as you can see, except I think what I would like to do is open this up just a tick so that it is exactly centered. Now it is. So as you can see, I keep discovering my own mistakes and I'm correcting them in front of you, which, like I said, is a good thing, because that is a very good way for you to learn as well. So this is configured completely differently from this one, but the inset is the same, that has the same design. In this one it's on the bottom, in this one it's on the bottom, but then in this one it's on the top. So, and then the image is again, so let me just also make sure that I have this one right as well. So I want it to be exactly on the center, so this little turquoise thing right here. So now it is. So what I did is, once I had put one together, and okay, let's just take a preview and you can look at them like that. So they butt each other. They're like a continuous column on the left hand side that is made out of grays and little color bars, and then we have the changing content on the right, and then the images as well, of course. And then I also added a tiny stroke, a 1 pixel stroke, to differentiate from one area into the next, so that people can see that this is actually a different section than this section here, and they can see that with this color bar also, and obviously the headlines and things are going to be completely different. So the way you do this is, when you are happy with one, you just say save to my designs. Okay, now I've already done that, so I'm not going to do it again. You go to my designs and it's right here. So this is what I saved. So if I want to make a page that consists of repeaters like this, then all I would do is I would just click on this, put it on the page, change whatever I want to change, change the image, change the size of the image, or where it's placed, or where the box is placed, but keeping the basic layout intact. And then when I go to the next section, then I would come here and I would click on this again, get another one, align it, and then change it, and then that's how that would go. And they are a very clever way of actually filling your content, or of showing your content, especially if your content is of a repeating kind. So if you are working on something where things are very, very different from one another on the same page, then this might not be a good way of doing it. But if you have similar things, so again, for example, your friend who's doing the website on Paris, that would be a good way of doing that one as well, because she's talking about different locations, and then she could just make pages where she has this kind of repeating material, and then she could do it with something like this as well. Now, and then on this one here, I actually changed the strip background to black, but this thing is, so let me just click on this. So this is exactly the same thing, but it has a transparent background. So what I did is I just added a white container box. So this is a container box, which I just scaled to and fitted exactly to the middle of the page, to the squiggly lines on the right and left, and then the strip on the top and bottom. And believe me, that's not so easy to do. You have to be pretty patient and keep previewing and going back and coming back and making sure that you don't have any gaps and things like that. But once you get it right, then it actually ends up looking quite nice. So that's the thing about image insets. So putting boxes inside the images, inside the image area, putting a caption there. I also added this little stroke for an extra emphasis. And then also, we haven't yet talked at all about color, but here I kind of like made a preliminary entrance to the topic, although we will be getting to that in the weeks to come, or probably actually next week. Now, with color, you want to be careful with color. So you want to use color in small amounts and not go crazy, because it will completely eat up your images. If you have a lot of color, your colored images are going to get chewed up. The color will chew up your images. It's a strong element. Now, the only way that if you have a lot of color on a layout would be then if you have black and white images. That's the only way that would really work. So, I mean, we can just try it right now. So let's say if I make this big, so I bring it all the way to here. Let's give it a preview. So what happened? My nice photograph just died, right? So that's why we are very careful with color. We don't overdo it. We keep the emphasis on the images themselves. The images themselves are actually what gives our layout vibrancy and gives the information and makes it beautiful and all of those good things. So how you choose your images is very important. You should always look out for images that are clear, that have definition, that have good color value. Stay away from like the sort of mushy artsy foggy stuff that looks nice on a wall, but it doesn't look nice on a layout most of the time, unless it's a very special kind of thing where you are working around that kind of visual language. But as a rule of thumb, nice clear images will work the best. So now that we have also covered this, we now come to placing text on images. The rule of thumb is, when you are putting text on an image, is that your image actually allows for that. So when you want to do that, look out for images that have a lot of neutral background, where you can actually put your text and no further aggro. It just boink boink, it's there. And this is actually has a scroll, parallax scroll. So, and I added a little animation here, to which I'll get to in just a minute. So let's just look at the scroll, at how it works. Now, I could have made these as long as the paragraph here, but then as I'm scrolling, I would have gone over this cream colored linen here, and then this text would have become impossible to read. So I actually moved it over. Hold on, let me just go back here. It's aligned to the start of the menu, and then I added a little line to actually bring about a relationship to this alignment here. Okay, but the bottom line with this is that this image here has a lot of empty background that allows me to place text without any further aggro. Now I can also find other kinds of images like that. I have a few of them right here that I can show you. that I can place there, and we can look at them together. So would be one of them, for example, this nice chocolatey thing. So let's give it a preview again. So this works perfectly as well, as you can see. Now, I did add an animation to this, and when you add animations to typography, always try to do things that go in steps, not just like boink one time, but in steps. So one thing shows up and then the next thing shows up. It goes over a period of time. So the way that I have this, if you customize it, this is coming, this has no delay at all, and it only animates the first time. So every time I scroll over this thing, it's not going to come back, it's just going to do it for the first time. And then the duration is 1.2 seconds, which I could probably increase to 1.5 or something like that, so that it comes in a little bit more slowly. And then this one here, if I customize that, this comes half a second later. And let's also make this one 1.5 so that we have consistency. So again, consistency is one of those things that which are also very, very important in design work. You always want to have consistent values, and that's what alignment is all about, actually. It's about consistency. So, but with timing, with all kinds of things, just try to be as consistent as you can. Don't try to do something different on every part of your website. Try to find one good system and then just apply that to all the different pages and all the different content, but making changes along the way. So if we go back up here, so these are the same system, but there are changes from one to the other. They're not exactly alike, and that is kind of what you should be shooting for. That is what good layout is actually all about. Now, I also made a dark strip with light text on it, and here I want to actually show you something. Now, if we look at this here, this is Barlow semi-condensed regular, and again, your paragraph text should be semi-condensed. We've already talked about that. It doesn't have to be Barlow, there's plenty of others out there. But here, it's actually light. But when you look at them together, well, you can't. Okay, so now we see both of them kind of roughly. They almost look the same weight. And that's something that happens especially on the screen, but also in paper layouts, that white text on dark backgrounds usually appears heavier than black text on white backgrounds. So you just go down one weight, and that's what I did here as well. So if I just go back to Barlow condensed regular, then you will immediately see the difference. So this is light, this is regular, and as you can see, this looks much heavier than this. So that's why I did that. Now there may, however, be a situation where you absolutely want to use an image and you want to also place text on it, in which case your best option would be to highlight it. So you just put a dark highlight, or if it's a dark, it could also be the other way around. It could be a white highlight with dark text, and then you make your text white. And then when you scroll over it, again, this has a parallax scroll, so let's just, but it's not going to repeat itself, it's only going to do it for the first time. Now, as we are moving across the image here, this is still very clearly readable. So that is one way of doing it as well, although I'm going to always advise you to look for images where you can actually place the text with no aggro whatsoever. Just put it down and it'll work. These here are finicky things which it's kind of like an added thing, and in design, not just graphic design but all design, architecture, all of them, the big motto is less is more, and here you are actually doing something that is more rather than less. So but there may be situations where you have an image that you absolutely want to use and you also want to put text on it, in which case this would be the correct way to do it. Now, with videos, that's not going to be enough. If you have if you have just highlighted text like this, which is kind of like coming in or out, then when you put that on a video, then that's not going to be enough, because the video is already in motion. And then when you also have kind of like a complicated shape that's coming in and out, that's usually going to be too much. I mean, there may be situations where it might work, but as a rule of thumb, when you are working, when you want to place a text on a video, then I would actually go ahead and make a whole box for it. And that would probably be your smarter option. So I put a container box here. I reduce the opacity to 63%, but this can probably even go down a little bit more, so let's just make it 50. And also the other thing, whenever possible, try to work with whole numbers, and so that you can remember them and use them over and over again. So now let's preview this, and so go all the way to the top. So the animation is coming. Here I didn't change the values, so it's still the old values. And then here, as you can see, this video is actually playing, and if I had had this here, that would probably have ended up being an overkill. Now, when you put images and videos next to each other, it's always a good idea to kind of look for color harmonies, that things go well together if they are close to each other. So for example, with these here I tried to do that, and with these here then I changed it and tried to do that as well. And here, before I changed this to chocolate, this was also kind of working with the avocados, with the color of the avocados. I'm not so interested in whether those are avocados or monkey nuts. I'm interested in the color scheme. Which is another thing. When you are selecting images, when you are placing images, yes, what the images say is important, of course, what the content is, but equally important is how that image actually looks. So you always have to take that into consideration as well, and not go and put some really horrendous looking image into your layout just because it's really good for the topic. You'll find something else, if you look long enough and hard enough, that is good for your topic and looks good. So that's something quite important that you should always keep in mind. Now, this is the end of this tutorial. Now I am going to making a separate tutorial for PNG images, which are transparent background images. I didn't want to squeeze that in here as well. This has become long enough as it is, and the because those, when I make that video, I'm also going to have to talk about how to find them, how to edit them, and things like that. So that's a separate topic altogether. Hopefully I will get to it this week, if not soon enough. And that's the end of this one, and I will see you guys later.